Hey everyone, this is Lisa from Life in Layouts and welcome back to day number 11 of March Madness. Today's page map sketch comes from November of 2019. I pulled out my Kellybell Designs Bayou Adventure kit, which I'm going to document kind of a follow-up to the pass holder preview. These particular photos are photos of when we went back to Magic Kingdom. When we did our pass holder preview, the beignets were not on sale because the shop had not officially opened. And so I knew that I had to go back to get the beignets. And of course, we had to ride the ride again. And I also knew that there was a photo opportunity that was not available for the pass holder preview that includes Tiana's tambourine. So I wanted to make sure that I got that as well. So this is just a few days after the ride had opened. I am using the silhouette for the print and cut features to cut out all of the embellishments. I also used the paper with this collection. The purple paper I used at a full 8.5 by 11, and I am going to trim that down a little bit. And then I have that darker blue paper that I'm going to use on the top. And then I also have the plaid paper. Now I am going to bring in a couple of other sheets because I do need some 12 by 12 paper for this particular layout. Of course, I like to ink up the edges, so I did that while some of the items were being cut out by the silhouette. And then I'm going to start to build up a couple of the cards that I'm going to add to my layout. This particular card here is going to actually be in a flip flap. I have two 3x2 photos that I want to include. This image here comes from the journal cards and I just scaled it down to a 2x3, and then I just cut out the down in New Orleans to add to the top of the card itself. I'm trying to get better with organizing my embellishments on the actual paper so that I'm not wasting a ton of paper, because I do feel like I'm using a lot of white paper. I did create this particular card by just adding the paper, and then on top of the paper I added the word flare, and then I used the ribbon and the flower from the kit itself to embellish that card. I didn't get to use the lanterns on the layout from yesterday, so I was super excited to be able to get them used on this particular layout. I, of course, pulled out the page starters, and I did just add a couple of pieces to it. Since it was a little bit smaller than the other page starters that I've been using, I didn't want to risk having really tiny pieces to add to it, even though I did end up with a couple. That lantern was really tiny, and it took a little bit to get these pieces on since they were so small. So I'm glad I only did a couple of them. For the flower, I'm going to add some foam adhesive directly to the card. And I did have to cut even the small foam adhesives in half because I needed some really tiny pieces. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with this title piece here that says, "Let the good times roll," because we were definitely enjoying some of the beignets from Magic Kingdom. So I did slow the video down here just so that you can see the detail that using the foam adhesive adds to these cards. There's so much detail on the cards already, but just this little extra touch, I really think that it stands out. And that is one of the things that I am loving about the digital elements. I feel like when I first started scrapbooking, the Jolie stickers were really popular with the multi-level dimensions. And I feel like I'm able to get that with these digital collections. I'm going to start to put the layout together by first cutting down this purple paper to 6.5 inches. So it's 6.5 by 11. And then I'm going to ink up the edges. I knew I was going to add that wood crate down to the bottom, so I was trying to add the purple paper above it so that it wouldn't cover up a lot of that purple paper. So I add the purple paper to both sides of the layout, and you're going to see here that I made a mistake when I was laying my layout down. I laid the wrong layout on the top and had to pull up that purple paper. Sometimes I just don't think about what I'm doing. When I originally created this layout, I was going to use this plaid paper at the top, and I just really didn't like it up there. So I felt like if I could bring in some of my own pattern paper that I have in my collection, I could add this down to the kind of center part of the layout. I did use this border punch that I just recently picked up from Bottom of the Bin. It's a local store that just opened up near me. They opened their second location, and I was super excited to pick that up. And then I'm going to add the blue paper on top of it, and I struggle a lot with this blue paper. Of course, I had to get the left-hand side of the layout down because I knew that I was going to lay the blue paper on top of this plaid paper, and I wanted to make sure that the plaid paper was straight on both sides. And of course it wasn't straight on the right hand side, so I had to pull that blue paper up to make sure that it had a equal border of the plaid paper. And I really like the way that that plaid paper just sticks out below the blue and ties the purple and the blue paper together. This is where I'm going to pull out my Doodlebug Petite prints in the floral. I think that this paper really works well with this layout. And then I also pulled out the linen paper in the bumblebee color. There's not a lot of yellow in this layout, but I do feel like just that touch of the 1/8 of an inch border at the top really does bring in all of the little tiny yellow elements that I have throughout the layout. Now that I got the base of the layout down, I did have to trim it down just a little bit because, you know, I have to do that on all of my layouts. And I still did not get this blue paper down straight. I looked at it and I was like, that is really not straight. And then when I pulled out my T-square ruler, it was way off. So I did have to pull that up and make sure that it was straight. And then I'm going to pull out my stitching tools and poke some holes. I'm just going to do one row of stitching on the top right below the yellow. And I felt like if I brought that purple, it's going to bring in the purple from the paper. So I am doing just a simple back stitch. I haven't been able to do a lot of stitching on my layouts this month because I have just been cranking them out, but I do get an itching every once in a while where I'm like, I need to put some stitching on these layouts. So even though this one is simple, I do feel like it does add a lot to the layout. I did slow the video down here so that you can just see that simple stitch that I added. And then I'm going to start to lay down the photos. Over on the far left-hand side, I have a photo of Eli and myself right before we got on the ride. And then I have our ride photo, as well as that photo with the tambourine. I love that they do a couple of different magic shots. The first one that's over there on the left really showcases the tambourine, and we are blurred out in the background. And then the photo on the right is a full photo of us with the tambourine. And then the 4 photos on the far right are of us eating our beignets. I absolutely should have added the border to this card before I put my fun foam on it. I struggled so much with it. And I'm glad it was a smaller piece because I don't know that I would have been able to get through the entire thing. I probably would have just been frustrated and gave up. So remember to put your borders on before you add foam adhesive to your cards. I'm then going to pull out my T-square rulers and get all of these photos down. I did decide again to add the photo of us on the bride up on fun foam. This photo is actually pretty funny because Eli tends to close his eyes when we go on like big roller coasters. And right before we get to the drop, he says to me, I'm going to keep my eyes open for this drop. And I was like, oh, really? Well, I have to watch this. So I am watching him keep his eyes open, and it is a pretty funny facial expression that he has because he's trying to keep his eyes open, but he really wants to shut them. This is actually Eli's first time having beignets. The only place that you can get beignets before Tiana's Bayou opened was at Port Orleans, and he's not really big about resort hopping, so he's never had a Mickey-shaped beignet. But he really did enjoy these beignets, and we've actually picked up a couple of other beignets when we've gone, because they're just yummy, yummy, yummy. And then I finally did add the page starter over on the far right-hand side of the layout. Now I'm going to start to work on the cluster that's down at the bottom of the layout. I definitely wanted to use that crate, and I wanted to build it up with a couple of the embellishment pieces. I love that lantern, and I'm so glad that I was able to get it on this layout since I wasn't able to get it on the other one. And then I did pull in that pink floral that I used a couple times on the other layout as well. And then right above the crate, I added a little tiara. I had cut out some of the pattern papers in these smaller squares because the sketch calls for these little circles up at the top right-hand side. And I knew that I wanted a couple of circles. I wasn't sure how many I wanted, so I went ahead and made it large enough for me to cut out one full circle and a half circle, because then I figured I was going to cut these circles in half anyway, so that would give me an option to have 3 half circles if I decided to use them. I actually only ended up using 1 half circle, so I really didn't need to cut out all of them. Once I got them all trimmed out and made sure that they were relatively the same size, I'm going to add them to the top of the layout. And I decided that I wanted the pink one to be on the top, but once I get all the other embellishments down, you can't even tell because you can barely see these circles. I'm going to add some fun foam to the back of this trumpet, and then I'm going to have some music notes that looks like it's coming out of the trumpet. I did decide to add this adventure on the Bayou, and that's what's going to cover up a majority of those circles. It's a lot larger than I probably should have made it. Probably could have made it a little bit smaller, but I'm just going to go with it. I'm not going to reprint it. When I'm putting these music notes down, I decide to put some of them flat to the layout, and then I'm also using different dimensions. So I do have the 1mm and the 2mm foam adhesive from scrapbook.com, so I'm adding both of those so that it gives me a variance of heights for the music notes. And I really like the way that that looks, because it looks like the music notes are coming out of the trumpet, and it just gives it a flow like it's actually music playing. I then decided to add a couple of music notes down to the cluster on the bottom. And then I'm going to start working on the flip flap. I do not have any flip flaps that are 2x3. So I took a 3x3 flip flap, and I'm going to use my fuse tool to make it a 2x3. I don't pull out my fuse tool very often, and I don't know that I actually use this correctly. I mean, it works, but I always feel like it's not what I think it's supposed to. So I did fuse the plastic together, and I cut off the end. And once I got the ends cut off as much as I could, I do take the fuse tool again and kind of seal where I've cut as well. Again, I don't know what I'm doing with this thing, and I just feel like that's the way it should go. I could be absolutely wrong with it. So in that flip flap, I'm going to add that little card that says "Down in New Orleans." And then there's a photo of Eli and I with the magic shot of Tiana. And so that's going to be on the inside of the flip flap. The sketch calls for this twine embellishment to be over on the left-hand side. So I just cut out 3 pieces of jute twine that are roughly the same size. And then I'm going to adhere the twine underneath the bottom and the top. So it does look like it's going to wrap around the paper, but it doesn't give me the bulk of having the jute twine behind the paper. I did hold the paper down for a little bit because I was using liquid adhesive and I wanted to make sure that it stayed. I sped up this process quite a bit. Once I got the jute twine down, then I decided to take another piece and I'm going to tie a knot around it. I did pull out my glue dots, and I'm going to add one directly to the paper, and then I'm going to add one between my knots as well to make sure that it stays. And then I'm going to cut off my edges. I decided that I would go ahead and add a glue dot to the bottom as well, just to kind of make sure that it stayed in place. And then I'm going to add a couple of music notes over to the far left-hand side. And then adding one up on foam adhesive and 2 flat to the layout. I usually do batch journaling, and that means that I save my layouts and print out a couple of them at a time. Sometimes I try to do the next layout that I'm going to be working on as well, especially if I have room on my spreadsheet. So I'm able to show you guys what I normally do when I am putting my journaling strips down. I do have a video on the template that I use, and I want to thank Nicole. She's the one that created the template. It just makes journaling so much easier. I also tend to get a lot of questions about my journaling font. It is Shadows into the Light, and it is available on Google Sheets. For this particular layout, I decided that I was just going to add some foam adhesive to the back of these strips. And my journaling says, Eli and I returned to Magic Kingdom to ride Tiana's Bayou again. During the ride, Eli announced that he would keep his eyes open for the drop, and I was determined to see if he could actually accomplish that. It resulted in a hilarious photo. We also couldn't resist indulging in some beignets as they had been closed during the pass holder preview. I then pulled out these little tiny hearts and added them all around the layout. I've had these hearts forever. I'm not exactly sure where I even got them, but they are super, super tiny, and the colors matched really well with this collection. I added a total of 25 tiny hearts around the layout, and I also sped this up because I was like, I'm going to leave all of that in so that you guys can see all the little tiny hearts that I'm adding. These sequence mix was something else that I got from Bottom of the Bin. I'll link my little unboxing video here for you guys. If you are local to the Tampa Bay area, I highly recommend that you check out this place. It had some amazing things. I definitely wouldn't have picked up this sequence mix, but it was in with some Simple Stories paper that I had picked up. And it was laying on my table and I was like, you know what, those colors, the purple and the green, work perfectly for this layout. So I'm gonna go ahead and add some of the sequin mix around. And I also feel like these sequences give a little nod to New Orleans and like Mardi Gras and things like that. So I added several over to the right, and then I decided to add a couple up with the music notes and really in each one of the embellishment clusters. So I'm excited that this new store is opened. She has 2 locations, one in Tampa area, and then the new location that she just opened is over in Brandon, which is closer to me. I dropped off a ton of stuff for her, and then I was able to pick up even more stuff. So I always am grateful to find a place like that where I can pick up secondhand scrapbooking stuff, because sometimes we just don't have stuff that we need to use anymore, and we want to have other people's stuff that they don't want to use anymore. All right, guys, that is it for this video. Here is my final layout as well as some close-ups. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos a day. I have so many more Disney layouts coming for you guys for the rest of this month. If you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already and you want to see more double page layout inspiration, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope that you have a scrappy day.